Hello learners, you are welcome to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. We are taking physics subject now, and I will be your physics instructor. So let's go.
Eko Learners Support, a support program of the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education for WAEC and NECO candidates.
This is friction. You have heard about friction before, right? Yes, you have heard about it. Remember those days when you are in school, your teacher will just come and say, oh, yeah, rub your palm, rub your palm, rub your palm. Yes, it's talking about friction. But much more than that, you will see now. Let's go. Friction. Look at the aspects we'll be considering under friction. Under this friction, we will talk about the definition, the real definition of friction, because you are preparing for NECO, you are preparing for WAEC now, no more in primary school. So you need to understand we have two types of friction. We'll talk about it in this class. Also, we look at the law governing friction. What are the statements that are valid, the fact statement around friction? Also, advantage and disadvantage of friction. Does it mean that friction has advantage and both disadvantage? Of course, yes. It has its uses, it has its demerit. More so, we'll be concluding with methods of reducing friction. Yes, friction can be reduced. It cannot be completely eliminated. You will see why. Now look at this. So you see what we want to learn. So there's something I'm expecting from you. What I'm expecting from you is that at the end of this lesson, you should be able to define friction. You should be able to tell me convincingly what friction is. Not only that, you should be able to tell me the laws governing solid friction. More so, you should be able to enumerate the advantages and disadvantages of friction. Further, you should be able to list different methods of reducing or minimizing friction. Now, look at this. Friction. What is friction? Hold on. Before you define friction, there are some key words you take note of. Either you define it as a force which acts on the surface of separation between two objects in contact and tends to oppose the relative motion between them. Look at some keywords. There must be contact and then it's opposing. You can put it this way, that friction is the resistive force which acts when two surfaces in contact move or slide against each other. This is it. For friction to occur, there must be two surfaces in contact. It's like before we talk about fight, before you mention fight, before you say friction, there must be two persons before fight can come up. So before you talk of friction, there must be two surfaces in contact. If you don't have two surfaces in contact, there is no way you can talk about friction. And then let me give you a hint. Once you have any two surfaces in contact, definitely friction exists. So when you're talking about friction, when I ask you to give me examples of cases when friction occurs, you should know that once any case that brings about two surfaces coming together, it's telling you that friction exists there. So when you are defining friction, you must take note that you talk about contact, object coming in contact, and the frictional force tends to oppose relative motion. So what happens is that once objects come in contact, if there's about to be a movement, friction tends to move the opposite direction. So which means that frictional force is an opposing force. So if you tend to move to the right, frictional force will move to the left. If you tend to move to the front, frictional force will move to the back. So that's where this word comes in. It tends to oppose. Now, look at types of friction. We have two types of friction. Number one, static or dynamic frictional force. And the second one is kinetic. From the word kinetic energy, you know that something is in motion. So kinetic or dynamic frictional force. So when we talk about static or dynamic friction, we are talking about the friction which exists between two surfaces when one is about to move. Take note, it has not moved. Once it starts moving, that means that object is in motion, then becomes kinetic. But when the object is about to move, I'll give you an instance, just follow. Now look at kinetic. It occurs when a body is already in motion. So which means that object at rest or object in motion both have friction existing between them. Once two surfaces are in contact, friction will exist. So look at this. Let me give you an instance now. You would have observed when they are pushing a car. If you have ever seen a car that broke down on the road and somebody is trying to push it, as they are pushing it, you see that they apply force to push the car. While you are pushing the car might not move immediately. 1, 2, go, you push. 1, 2, go, you push. As you are trying to push, the car will not move. It's like the car is stubborn. But once the car starts moving, you will see that at times, out of 5 people pushing the car, that they push the car before the car starts moving, you will see that one person can drop and stop pushing it. But the remaining 4 persons or 3 persons will keep pushing it. So which is telling you that static frictional force is more than dynamic frictional force. Before the object starts moving, it took enough force. But once it starts moving, you need lesser force. So static frictional force is the force that exists between two objects in contact before motion starts. But once motion starts, what you now have is called kinetic or dynamic frictional force. Now, what are the laws governing solid friction? I made use this word solid friction because we have liquid friction of friction in fluids. That is, we'll talk about that when we get to viscosity. So we are not going there now. So you understand when I make use of the word solid friction, so you don't mix it up. Now, what are the laws governing solid friction? What are the statements of facts that are valid as far as friction is concerned? Number 1, friction opposes the relative motion between the surfaces in contact. So once you talk about friction, what comes to your mind should be opposition. And the friction will not come up until there is contact. Once there is contact, there is friction. So, and the major reason why the friction is there is that it's going to oppose friction. So as this object makes contact with my hand, friction starts existing. As this object wants to move forward, frictional force will move backward. So friction tends to oppose relative motion. Not only that, friction is independent of the area of surface in contact. What it means is this: friction does not need that you have a large surface in contact. Once there is contact, it could be as simple as the tip of this pin, as small as that. It could be as small as the tip of a pen. It could be as small as the tip of a needle. Once there is contact, friction occurs. It could be as small as the sole of your shoe. Once it touches the ground, friction must exist. It could be as flat as the tire of a vehicle. Once it touches the ground, friction must exist. It could be as big as the surface of a big container. Once you put it on the ground, once there is contact, friction will exist. So therefore, we say that friction does not depend, it is independent. It means it does not depend on the area of the surface in contact. But then, friction is dependent on the nature of the surface in contact. This is it. If the nature of the surface is telling us whether it is smooth or rough. So if the surface is smooth or the surface is rough, it has effect on the friction. So if the surface is rough, the friction will be higher. Now when the surface is smooth, the friction is lower. Let me explain. Look at it. When we're much younger, we go through a smooth floor, maybe the passage of a building. You run and you slide. That's possible. But you can't try that outside where the ground is coarse, is rough. You would want to try that. Why? Because this ground is rough. If you try it, you will not be able to slide. So that is telling you that where you can slide, the friction there is poor. How? Once they pour water there, when you are walking, you walk gently because you don't want to fall down. Because you making contact with the ground and friction is not existing, is putting you at the risk of falling down. So friction considers the fact that is your surface in contact rough or smooth. So that is what this statement is explaining by saying that it is dependent on the nature of the surface in contact. You get that? So we go to the next part. Now look at this. They said friction, it varies directly with normal reaction. There is a formula for friction, and that formula is that F equals to nu R. So from here, you see this F is the force and this R is your normal reaction. So what this is saying is that whatever happens to normal reaction directly affects the frictional force. So from here, so whatever happens to frictional force, we can say is a function of what is happening to the normal reaction. So this statement is coined from this formula. The next part, kinetic friction is always less than static friction. Remember I said it, that before you push a car to move, you require enormous force. But once it starts moving, you will see that it will be moving. You will require lesser force to do that. That is why for all your cars, Gear 1 is the strongest. Why? Because for your car to leave the spot where it is, it's going to be by using Gear 1. And that's telling you that it's going to overcome the highest frictional force to leave rest. Once it starts moving, you can start changing gear to gear 2 and the likes. Good one. So let's continue to the next one. We have this, it increases as the weight of the body increases. Yes, frictional force increases as the weight of the body increases. Don't forget that if you have a body lying on this horizontal surface, now this body exerts a particular force that is called weight. And equal and opposite to it is what we call normal reaction. Now let me say something that will make you remember what normal reaction is. Normal reaction is like if you stay here now and somebody steps on your leg, that person exerts weight, but you feel the pain. If it's a little boy that steps on you, you just look at the boy and you just take off your eye. But when somebody is fatter than you, who has more weight than you, steps on your leg, you feel that pain. That pain is like the normal reaction. And the amount of pain you will feel is a function of the weight of the person stepping on you. So which means that as the weight increases, normal reaction also increases. And don't forget that the frictional force is a function of normal reaction. Implicit to that, it is also a function of the weight of the body. So as the weight of the body increases, so the frictional force also increases. So that is the validity of that statement. Now, the advantage of friction. Why do we need friction? Having said all of this, what do we gain making use of friction or for friction to exist? Number one, do you know that it is possible for us to walk because there is friction? Look at it. The sole of your shoe and the ground makes contact, and once there is contact, friction exists. That is why once the floor is wet, you walk gently. Why? Because the frictional force is reduced. So if you walk so hard, so fast, when the ground is wet, you fall because the frictional force is poor. So take note of that. Also, it makes it possible for a ladder to rest on the wall. Look at those who are those electric workers, those who work with electricity and the like. Before they come to your house to fix your light and everything, they rest their ladder on the wall. So if the wall is wet or the ground is slippery, if they pull the ladder and they attempt to climb, they will fall because the frictional force at that moment is poor. So for ladder to rest on the wall conveniently, there must be frictional force between the ladder and the wall. Not only that, it makes gripping of objects possible. If you have visited those who are selling catfish, you understand what I'm saying here. If you get a catfish and you try to hold it, before you know it, you slip from your hand. Why? The body is slippery and it is streamlined. So and therefore the frictional force is low. Once frictional force is low, it will not give room for good gripping or grabbing of object. So if you are holding something that is slippery, it means that the frictional force between that object and your hand is poor. So, but when your hand is dry and you grab something that is not slippery, you feel that you can hold it firm because then the frictional force is high. Look at this part. It makes it possible for tires to move on the road. Now, imagine a road that is very slippery. It means when you place the tire on that road, it will not have a grip on the road. And once it doesn't have a grip on the road, for it to move on the road becomes problem. That is why if you go to rural area, you see cars having problem moving freely on the road because the road is not hard. The road becomes slippery because it's muddy once it rains. So that is why it is difficult for those people who are in the rural area to transport their goods to us in the city. So let's go to the next part. The advantage of friction. It makes it possible for nail to screw to stay on the walls. So if you have a nail that wants to stay on the wall, for that nail to remain on the wall, it has to have a grip. But the wall is going to hold it. As it comes into the wall will have a grip on it. If the wall doesn't have a grip on the nail will fall off. So if the nail is having a good grip, it means there's a frictional force existing between the nail and the wall. So it's going to make it possible for it to stay on the wall. It also makes it possible for us to sharp object. If you want to sharp object, it means there's going to be grinding. So if, for instance, now, if you dip your knife inside okra soup or something very smooth, like let's say you are making use of grease and you now want to sharpen it, it will be difficult because as you make attempt, it will not be able to grind. So, and for you to sharp object, you need to cut off some parts of that object, so which is grinding. This is possible. This is made possible when there is frictional force. Look at this other part. It enables car brake to work wonderfully. If car brakes are not working, I'm sure you will not want to enter that car. So when it happens that the brake pad of a car has chopped off and is now extremely smooth, the mechanic will tell you your brake pad is bad. Go and change it so that you will not run the risk of accident. What he's just trying to tell you is physics, that the friction that will make your car hot at any point you want it has been tampered with. So just go and replace it and make the friction firm again and bring back the friction again. That's what he's just trying to say. Now let's look at the disadvantages of friction. As beautiful as friction is that we have talked about, do you know friction also has its own adverse effect? Now look at it. Let me tell you something. Why is it that the shirt you are wearing, that you would say, I don't want this shirt again. Daddy should buy another shirt for me. Mommy should buy another shirt for me. Why? Let me ask you, why is it that your school uniform, if you check it, when you sit down, that your bum place is always stained as if it's going to have a mark. Why? It is because of this same friction. As beautiful as it is that you cannot do without walking, you cannot do without friction if you want to walk. So also, it is that same friction that will make you to go and buy another school shoe, that will make you to go and buy another sandal, that will make you to go and buy another slippers. Why? Because it causes what we call wear and tear. The wear is what you observe under your shoe. The tear is an example of what happens to your clothes. Also, it generates heat. That is why if you look at it when you're in primary school, they will ask you to rub your palm. If they want to teach you about friction, they say put it on your cheek. You feel heat. It's because the two palms are rubbing on each other, they're in contact. That is why it can generate heat. So that's why if you take a chair now or a table and you drag it, you will see that if you touch that part where it's making contact with the ground, it becomes very hot. So once there is contact and there is movement between the two contacts, it will bring about heat, and that is because of this friction that is existing. It reduces the efficiencies of machine, yes, because it's like this now. You need, let's assume you want to carry this pen from my hand now. As you attempt to lift this pen, there is someone holding it down. It means you need to overcome that person holding it down before you can remove the pen. So that is how it is. For frictional force, for machines to work, you need to overcome the frictional force. So you are going to put effort. So if you are going to work and the work you want to do is just 10 joules, and there is a frictional force that is waiting, that said you have to treat that frictional force. You have to put consideration of that frictional force into the energy you are going to supply, into the force you are going to supply into the machine. So which means that you will now need much more than you need because of friction. Now, there is a way you can reduce friction. Though you might not be able to completely eliminate it or eradicate it, but you can minimize it. How? Use of lubrication. When you apply lubrication, e.g. your grease and your oil, engine oil, it tends to reduce friction. So we do this in area where we feel we don't need friction and friction is existing. We try to reduce the effect of friction. Also, the use of ball or roller bearing. So the ball or roller bearing is just for movement of objects over another one, such that it will not have damaging effect on each other. For instance, your bicycle wheel, you will see there is what we call, there is a particular place we call, let me give you an illustration so that you can get what I'm saying. If you have a bicycle wheel like this, there's a place like this. At the back tire, you have something like this, and the front tire, you have something like this. This is the ball bearing. This object, this part here, is moving over this part without grinding it. So this object A is moving over object B, and A is not directly grinding on B. Why? Because these balls will allow free movement in the circular part. So this is reducing the effect of friction of A on B. So this is what we call ball bearing. Also, use of streamlined bodies. Streamlined bodies are like the shape or the structure of fish, just that to allow movement of an object such that it will reduce friction. Also, polishing or smoothing of surfaces. So when you polish object, when you polish a surface or you smoothen it, it becomes very smooth, thereby reducing friction. And so all of these methods can be used to reduce friction in any surface. So you can see that you have learned something today about friction. So let me give you some seconds and see whether you can recall what you have just learned. So let's go to practice questions. So look at these questions 1 to 4. I'll give you 30 seconds to ruminate and generate some answers. So I'll come back to you. All right? You could remember what we have done? Good. Look at this. What is friction? What did you say about friction? Don't forget, for whatever you are saying about friction, you must include the word contact and also a resistive force. Look at number 2, the 5 laws of solid friction. Mention 5. Don't forget, it must oppose motion for it to be a frictional force. Not only that, the static frictional force is more than dynamic frictional force. Not only that, you know that frictional force is directly proportional to normal reaction. All of them we have said in the class. Give 2 reasons why friction can be a disadvantage. So why do you feel that you may not want to associate yourself with friction, even though you can't do without friction? Yes, it causes wear and tear. It makes you buy Ilea clothes every year. It makes you buy Christmas shoe every year, because as you are buying it, nothing has happened to it. It's still looking good on the surface, but the underneath has been chopped off. Why? This friction is responsible for it. Look at this. The last question here says that explain why a car can skid when it is raining. To skid means to slide uncontrollably. So a car can skid when it is raining because the frictional force between the tire of the car and the ground is weak, is small. Therefore, it's advisable that if you are driving under the rain, you drive gently and you drive easily, because there is tendency that the car can skid, which can lead to a fatal accident. Thank you for listening to me and being attentive in this class. I want to believe you have learned something from this class today. If you have any comment, any question or observation, kindly follow or forward everything to the social media link that will be displayed on the screen. Once again, thank you.